Hello and welcome. It's Friday. It is the start of the weekend. Well, technically it's not. It's not the weekend, it's Saturday, but people universally seem to think Friday is the start of the weekend. And what a week it's been. Another exciting, interesting, week in the history of Brexit. Brexit. Of course, Theresa May this week has got another extension. She went to Brussels and did a bit of ass kissing and boot licking and was able to get an extension longer than she wanted, but shorter than Donald Tusk wanted, and also shorter than Macron wanted. But anyway, we now have an extension until October the 30th, Halloween. The irony there is not lost in the much of the media across the world. And but it's a flex extension where Theresa May says if we do get a deal before then we could leave before then. Oh well. Now, what this also means is there's an increased chance that various things could happen that have so far been off the table because of Theresa May's deadlines. And obviously she's in talks at the moment with opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn. We have no idea how that's going. Well, both sides say it's constructive, whatever that means, although Labour are hinting not really much has changed, which is hardly surprising. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is the idea of a people's vote, because lots of people have raised the idea, and obviously there's people who are very strongly against and very strongly for. I will say, first of all, I'm not a great fan of referendums. As a young person, I thought, yes, this is a great sign of democracy. In the previous video, when I was talking about political correctness around levers, I briefly mentioned that I'm not particularly for referenda. Referenda only really work very well when you have a really well-educated and informed population. And sadly, lots of populations simply aren't. It's fine. We obviously want people to elect their representatives, but often for topics which are put to referenda, you really have to have much of a deeper level of understanding of those things than when we just simply elect an MP or representative to represent us in Parliament, who we expect to be the expert, who we expect to do the hard graft and the work to find out more about these things and go ahead. But there are other countries for who referenda is a much more regular thing. In Switzerland, for example, they do referenda a lot more regularly. Even here in the Netherlands, I believe they do referenda a little bit more regularly than in other countries. And sometimes, very often, they do have what are called confirmatory votes, where they will have one referendum initially to say, shall we go ahead with doing A or B? And they choose A or B, and they say, okay, we'll go ahead and try and do that, and we'll come back with what the result is, and then you can vote on whether you accept that result. Same within lots of trade unions around the UK and around the world. They will do that. They'll say, shall we do A and B? Yes. And then we'll come back. This is the deal we have. Should we accept that deal or not? So it's not unusual for that to happen. And of course, on June 23rd of 2016 in the UK, there was a referendum, an in-out referendum on whether we should remain or leave in the European Union. And they were the only two options: remain or leave. So stay in the European Union or leave the European Union. There was no other options as in how should we leave the European Union? Should we still remain in the customs union? Should we remain in a single market? Should we just have some kind of independently catered trade agreement? Should we leave just completely on World Trade Organization terms? Those options were never given to us. A lot of discussion was around them. As I said in my previous video, various politicians presented the idea that we could still remain in the customs market and the customs union and the single market, but nothing was ever presented as a real option. It was simply then left to the government to then decide what the people wanted, which is such a crazy idea because there are millions of people who voted, and who can say what a group of 17.4 million people wanted when they all probably wanted different things. Anyway, before I go on and discuss why I actually do support having a second referendum, although I hate that term because it's not a second referendum, that implies it's the same question as the first time, which it wouldn't be. Nobody has ever asked an MP this question, as far as I'm aware. As an MP, which could you find it easier to do? You have a constituent. Your constituent, let's say, works in a car factory. There's quite a few around the UK. The UK is quite a major car producer for various different companies like Toyota, Honda, Jaguar Land Rover, and they also make engines for Ford. So there's also Boeing airline. So, but let's say he works in a car factory, and several car companies already said they're going to close down or they're going to be reducing their operations. So the reality is, particularly in a hard Brexit, with no deal, that those factories will probably be leaving at some point in the future. And even with a softer Brexit, that still might be an option because they're still going to be spending more money probably, depending on what the deal is. It's going to be a worse deal than what we currently have. And companies have to weigh up those costs. And at the end of the day, private enterprise is about profit. They don't really care that much about their employees. What's more important is they make money. And if they have to move, then they will do that. So what conversation would you rather have? Let's say we leave the European Union. And let's say we leave with a deal, but the deal isn't brilliant because any deal is going to leave us poorer. Let's say we leave with a deal, but the car factory decides, I still don't want to stay in the UK. They're still going to cost us more money. Over the years, we're going to be losing millions and millions, if not billions of pounds because of this deal. It's making it harder for us to get workers. It's much more restrictive. It's just making the whole process much more difficult. It's taking more time to get the goods coming over, so on and so forth. So let's say there is a deal, but the car factory still wants to leave because no deal has been taken off the table, apparently. It could still happen. And certainly in a no deal scenario, this would definitely happen. But let's say it even happens with a soft Brexit. The car factory decides to close down or reduce. Let's say it's not closed down, it's reduced operations and it's got rid of 1,000 people. And one of those people is your constituent. And he's lost his job. There are no other car factories in the area. He's finding it very hard to get another job. He can't keep up payments on his mortgage. He just bought a house. He can't keep up payments on his mortgage. He's finding it hard to pay his bills. He's finding it difficult to get his food. He has to go to a food bank to get food. And after several months, he's still not found a job. He's lost his house because his house has been taken into retrievership by the bank because he can't keep up payments. And so he has no house. So technically he's homeless. He's got 2 kids and a wife. They're also homeless as well. And he comes knocking on your constituency office. And he says, I voted leave, but I didn't expect this. This is what has happened. I've lost everything. Now, as an MP, you're going to turn around to him and say, yeah, you've lost everything. We knew that might be a possibility, and I'm sure you did too, but at least we took back control. Yay! Would you rather have that conversation, or would you rather have this conversation? Listen, I know you're getting frustrated that we haven't left the European Union, but we've made the decision not to. Let me explain why. In the referendum, you voted to leave, and we totally respected that. And we tried our hardest to try and make that work. The reality is that every single scenario we tried to explore, whether it was no deal, whether it was a different type of soft deal, every single scenario looked in every single forecast by various different experts. And I know you don't like experts. I know you don't like them. And they're not always spot on, but they are experts for a reason. Every single one calculated and forecasted that we will be worse off and that you will be poorer and that I know you work for a car factory. The chances are your car factory might consider moving or reducing operations and your job would be at risk. As an MP, I can't take that risk. I know you want to take back control, but actually we would be losing control with any of the deals because we'd still have to follow European Union rules and regulations. We'd still have to try and get some trade agreement with the European Union. And it's going to make it much harder to do that outside of the EU. It's going to increase your costs. It might mean you lose your job, which then means you might lose your home. You might not be able to pay your bills. You might not be able to feed your family, and your family might become homeless. What would you rather? Would you rather take back control and stop these foreign-speaking Eastern Europeans from coming in and taking what you think is your job? Or would you rather keep the deal we have, keep your job, keep the roof over your head, Keep feeding your family 3 regular meals a day. Keep your kids secure with their own bedrooms. Keep your wife happy, happy wife, happy life, as I'm constantly reminded. You can afford to have 1 holiday every year with your family. Yes, probably in the UK, but you might be able to go to Benedict or somewhere like that. Or would you rather not have any of that, but take back control? As an MP, I took the decision that your happiness, your security, and your wealth was, when your family was more important than the myth, the delusion of British nationalism and English nationalism particularly that drove Brexit. As an MP, which conversation would you find it easier to have? I know, as disappointed as my constituent might be, I would rather have the latter. I don't know about you. But anyway, if somebody, the fact is we now know what the options are, probably, or at least we will know. What certain parties are saying is we should put Theresa May's deal to the public and ask them what they think. That's a possibility. But we should certainly put whatever deal is being put, because as I've said, and many experts say whatever deal there is, no deal, customs unions, single market, they are less damaging, but all of them are going to do damage to the British economy, or more damage to the British economy than staying in the European Union. Every single expert says that, or reliable, rational expert. I get that that's subjective, but every single government department and the expert that governments have consulted on their own research, for their own research, have concluded that any deal is worse than the deal we currently have. That doesn't mean if we do stay in the European Union, we shouldn't try and work with people like Macron to try and make reforms within the European Union, make it a better institution. But you know what? The UK isn't perfect either. The UK government needs change. The Parliament needs changing. Political system needs reforming. There is no perfect political system. Nothing is perfect. They're all invented by man, or humans, as I should politically correctly say, and none of them are perfect. So the EU certainly isn't perfect, and we should try and make a change. But my point is, if the British public really want to make themselves poorer, if the British public really want to risk losing their jobs, and let's face it, the majority of people who voted leave are the types of people who are more likely to be in those scenarios than the people that voted remain. I'm not saying the people who voted remain aren't also at risk, but the people that voted leave tend to, statistically, demographically, come from situations where they are more likely to be in that situation where they are at risk. If, in full knowledge of that risk, they still want to go ahead, then fine. But they should be asked. The point is, and why it's called a confirmatory vote or people's vote, and why it shouldn't be called a second referendum, is because it's not simply a repeat of the first referendum. We wouldn't be asking again, should we remain or should we leave? That's not the question now. The thing is, we should say, listen, we've tried to make leave work. This is the version of leave we are now presenting to you. You now hopefully know a lot more about the EU. You know a lot more about the advantages and disadvantages of being in the EU. You know a lot more about the risks and possible benefits of this deal and also no deal. Because I personally think that in any referendum, any confirmatory vote, there should be 3 questions. There should be, okay, so now, what would your choice be? Would you like to accept the deal that the Prime Minister is putting to Parliament and to you? Accept that deal. Or should we remain with our current situation, which is in the European Union? Or should we 3, leave with no deal? Because I think if the British public are stupid enough to want to put their country at that risk, then go ahead, do it. If you're that stupid, do it, but ask them first. No country should put their country in that situation without first checking that the majority of the country are okay with it. So that's why I, under these circumstances, support a confirmatory vote, because I don't actually think there's any way out of this bullshit. Really. I would like Article 50 just to be rescinded, but that would cause utter chaos. And I'm not saying a referendum is going to be perfect either, but the fact is the country's already divided. It's already divided. There are already nutcases go on the streets. The fact is the far right are going to behave like twats no matter what. And the reasonable people who voted Remain calmly, they're going to be protesting about wanting to remain in the European Union, even if we leave the European Union, because they'll want to get back in, but they'll do it in a calm, collected, educated, rational way, as opposed to the right wing, who will do it in a thuggish, vandalistic manner. There we go. Disrespectful manner. Not that I'm biased in any way whatsoever. But the least harmful, the least painful option, as far as I can see, is to ask the people again. Is this definitely what you want? Here are your options. Now we know, here are the actual options that are available to you. The deal, remain, or leave completely. What do you want? So that's my argument for a confirmatory vote. There we go. Now, I've also said in this episode, although I've now talked for 60 minutes, so if you've reached this far, you're doing very well. But I'm also going to read some feedback that I got. And it's not positive on the whole. So the first feedback I got was on Twitter. And it was positive, but with a bit of a whoosh, a whip in the tail from somebody. So, and I'm sure lots of people think this. He says, this is Nicholas Jones, with no picture on his Twitter. He's obviously very proud of himself. Says, although much of what you say is absolutely valid and correct, the tone is, in my honest opinion, more than a tad condescending and unlikely to win you converts from the other side. I doubt I'm going to convert anybody. And I don't really do this to convert anybody. I do this because it's just an outlet for me. I don't expect anybody to be watching. Now, I'm sure there are people who will be listening who think what I say is complete rubbish, and you're allowed to challenge it, absolutely. And I'm sure there may be people who are thinking, oh, yeah, he speaks some sense. And I'm sure there are people listening who think he sounds really patronizing and condescending. Now, unsurprisingly, it's not the first time in my life I have heard that. One, it might be true that I am condescending. I'm sure sometimes I am. But I want you to understand this. First of all, I was a teacher, so in a secondary school. So maybe sometimes I speak in a way as if I'm almost speaking to students. But I've actually always spoken like that because both my parents were teachers and almost all of their friends were also teachers. And my grandma was a teacher as well. So I was surrounded in my life by teachers who probably spoke to me like I was a pupil, and they spoke like a teacher, which most people would probably say that when you're an adult, being spoken to like that is perhaps quite condescending. So there is that, and I'm aware that that might be the case, but this is how I talk, and I'm not going to change for anybody, I'm afraid. The other option is, the other possibility is that I'm not condescending, but you feel that I am. Maybe you have a complex, maybe you, and I don't know what it is, but maybe you feel I'm being condescending because of a lack of something in yourself. That probably isn't the case. Well, I'm just putting it out there as devil's advocate as a possibility. But I'm conscious that when I speak, because I used to be a very fast speaker. And people say to me, you need to slow down, particularly when I did acting or when I was presenting things, you need to slow down. So I'm aware that sometimes I over-accentuate my words, I speak perhaps quite slowly, and that can also come across as a bit condescending. So I'll say I'm sorry if you find me condescending, but I'm not going to apologize for the way I talk. This is the way I talk. I'm not going to change for anybody. And if you can put up with it, well done. You're a better man than me, because I find myself infinitely. I find myself infinitely. Is that the word? I've forgotten how to speak English. I've been living in the Netherlands too long. Infinitely irritating at times. So I do understand. I'm with you. Right. That was the first bit of feedback. Now, the other one was a bit more serious. It was from somebody I know who's Jewish. And now, in my first video that I did about LGBTI schools, I talked about how, because most of the people who opposed LGBTI relationships educations were Muslims. And I talked about my opposition and disagreement. I said I'm an atheist, I'm an anti-theist, I don't like religion. But you must understand, however, I wasn't an RE teacher, but just because I don't like religion doesn't mean I'm not interested in it. For many years, I had a real fascination with Judaism, more so Jewish culture and history, which is actually a separate thing. That's not religious, although it's connected with the religion. But I was also interested in Judaism. I went to several synagogues in and around London to learn more, to follow the services, to educate myself more. I also taught many Muslims. My foster son is of a Muslim background. My girlfriend is half Muslim. So I'm very well aware of Islam. And also when I taught Ari, the two main religions we had to teach about were Christianity and Islam. And also I was brought up to be Christian. I went to a Christian school, a secondary school. So I have a very good knowledge of all three religions. But the one I have practically more knowledge about is actually probably Judaism, to be honest with you. And I still have an interest in, as I say, not so much Judaism, because I think all religion is bullshit. It's based on the lie of a supernatural being, which I do not believe exists. So then everything else that follows must be a lie. And must be bullshit. Although sometimes within it, there are nice messages, but there are also horrible messages as well. And I didn't want to single out any particular. If I was going to criticize Islam, I'm going to criticize Christianity and Judaism as well. And I'll happily criticize other religions, but they are the three major Abrahamic faiths and the three that I'm also most familiar with. So if I'm going to go there, I'm going to go there. Now, so this message I got, and I must admit my response wasn't terribly great, although it was sort of off the cuff. I will warn you now, some things he says are factually incorrect. I'm going to prove him wrong today. But anyway, from my friend Paul, somebody I know, Paul, who I acted with in the past, who is Jewish. He says, "Hey, Benedict, hope you're well. Long time no speak. Just wanted to say, nice video. The whole thing has been getting me angry, to be honest. If I'm honest, I wish you hadn't have said the bit about the Torah condoning genocide of several people. It's not exactly true, and Jewish people don't quite need the bad press at the moment. I know what you're referring to, but it's one group, the Amalekites, which isn't true, who obviously don't exist anymore. Is that in support? What's that meant to mean? Because if they don't exist anymore, they're obviously very good at committing genocide against them. And it's written about a war, not just a general hatred. It's also in the Tanakh and not the Torah. It's a text. It's a sacred text of the Jewish faith. But anyway, it's not in that, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm not saying that's okay then, and obviously it was written like 3,000 years ago. Excuse me. Whatever. At some point, thousands of years ago, like we actually know. Which isn't 3,000 years ago, which isn't relevant today, but it's also a very orthodox point of view, and the progressive movements are hugely critical. I don't care whether the progressive movements are hugely critical. I call liberal progressive people, I call them pick and mixers. The fact is, your book was written supposedly because it's the word of God. And if the word of God was valid then, surely it's valid today. But anyway, that's another point, although I did briefly touch on it the last time. It just felt a bit taken out of context, and I felt a bit like it was a broad stroke on a topic which someone could run with and start thinking that you're okay with genocide. Anyway, congrats on the vid and the fitness video. I was tempted to get in touch with about that too. Okay, first of all, let me make this very, very clear. Jews are not okay with genocide, as far as I'm aware. There may be some individual Jewish assholes who are really ultra-Orthodox who wish that Muslims were all killed, for instance. I know some white people who think that. They're idiots. Although that wouldn't be genocide as such, that would be religicide, faithicide or something, whatever the Latin word for religion is. But anyway, either way, whatever. Let me make that very clear. Jews do not condone genocide. It is wrong. Just like Christians do not condone paedophilia, or the rape, the gang banging of someone's daughter, or the sacrifice of your child. Nobody should go out and sacrifice their son, although that happened in the Bible. Many Christians I know are not condoning the stoning of homosexuals, even if they disagree with homosexuals. They do not necessarily think you should take a homosexual and stone him to death. That would be wrong. So let me make that very clear. I've never said Jews think genocide is acceptable. No, no, no. Now, I did respond, and I didn't respond in a very mature way. I did say it's actually a mitzvah, which I will explain in a minute. Get over it. It says it. It's hardly an isolated act of bloodthirsty brutality in the Torah. And if I'm going to single out the Quran and Bible, you think I'm not going to mention the Torah for fear of offending Jews? And then I said, fuck off. I'm getting very impatient as I get on. And then he sent a very impatient, long thing there. I'm just going to read out his last one. I'm saying that before you make wide statements like Jews love genocide, I never said Jews love genocide. I simply said within, and this is wrong, not in the Torah, but in one of the holy texts, it says Jews should commit genocide. Now, let me read. This is my evidence. Let me go. And then I thought, let me just double check. Because first of all, I think if my memory served me correctly, I think he got wrong the group of people that Jews were supposed to kill. Because if my memory was correct, one of the groups, I believe it was two, one of them was the Canaanites. So I wanted to just double check that. I'm on the Chabad.org, and the Chabad is an international Jewish organization which serves many purposes. One of them is as an education center to help teach people about Judaism. And on there, they've got all sorts of questions. This is Torah and genocide. So they've actually got a section all about it on here. And it says, did God want not just promote, but command genocide, including women and children, even infants? This is a Jewish organization. Okay? Apparently, I'm not allowed to say it because I'm not Jewish. Okay? He does go on about me being a straight white male. Why that's relevant, I don't know. The fact is, I have a knowledge. I've done some research. I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. But anyway, if you don't take it from me, let's take it from a Jewish organization. And they say, so the question is, does God not just want to promote, but command genocide? And the answer, the first word is yes. Not genocide as we know it, since no one spoke of genes in those times, but something that looks quite ugly nonetheless. Oh, so it wasn't genocide, because that word didn't exist back then. Of course, it's bloody genocide. Anyway, let's find out. The Israelites were commanded to entirely eliminate the tribes that inhabited the land of Canaan in their conquest. The reason given was so that they would not assimilate their evil ways. Who's to decide what their evil ways are? Anyway, that's the reason given. That's one of the reasons it's not really genocide. Why? If a tribe or a member of one of these tribes abandoned the offensive behavior of his or her tribal cult, they were no longer targeted. It doesn't actually specify what the offensive behavior was, but obviously it's a behavior that the Israelites disagreed with, or God or whoever it was, some preacher, told them they disagreed with. So I don't know what the behavior was, but they didn't like it. So they didn't like it, so they had to kill them. Yeah. There is a tradition cited in the Jerusalem Talmud that Joshua sent 3 letters warning these people and offering a truce if they would keep the Noahide laws, basic universal law, and pay a tax to the Israelites or leave the land. It scarily sounds quite familiar, doesn't it? Those who did not accept were to be entirely wiped out. In practice, only one tribe accepted this arrangement with some complications. The Israelites never fully carried out the command to eliminate the Canaanites, although large numbers were slaughtered in battle. And yes, they did end up often ensnared in many of the degenerate practices of these people, whatever they are, whoever it is to decide what degenerate is. And these people continued their hostilities for many centuries, as detailed in the book of Judges and the book of Kings. The Israelites were also commanded to entirely eliminate, so they were supposed to eliminate the Canaanites, which they didn't entirely do. They killed a few, but they didn't entirely eliminate them off the face of the planet. But the Israelites were also commanded, as I knew correctly, to eliminate the Amalekites. So neither of the tribes that my friend Paul claims it was. King Saul came close to accomplishing this, but it was never entirely fulfilled. As a result, an Amalekite named Haman came close to annihilating the entire Jewish population many centuries later, which is wrong. But it's all wrong. Any tribe or group of people that somebody's telling should be wiped off the face of the planet is wrong. All genocide is wrong. Whoever's committing it against whoever. An Amalekite also has the choice to abandon his or her tribe for a civil way of life. Oh, isn't that nice? The Talmud tells that descendants of Haman and Amalekite converted and taught Torah. There was also a war of retribution on the Midnights that sends chills down my spine. So there you have it. Chabad. And by the way, it is a mitzvah. In the Bible, there are 10 commandments. Now, mitzvah means commandment. And in the Jewish faith, there are 613 mitzvah, things that as a Jew you should do. And one of them says you should kill all Canaanites and all, what was this one? I've completely forgotten. Amalekites. You should kill them. You might want to give them a warning. You might want to say you might want to change your behaviors, whatever that is, but obviously behavior you don't like. There we go. So it's true. And Paul, you are wrong. I'm not saying anything that isn't written down somewhere within a sacred text of Judaism. I'm also not saying that Jews love genocide. That would be absolutely preposterous. I also made the point in my first video that the Holocaust was horrific, and in my honest opinion, the most horrific act ever committed against any group of people. The most barbaric, brutal, murderous act ever. And I don't care who the victims were. It is irrelevant to me the fact anybody was a victim. Of course, the Jews were the biggest victims, but there were other groups as well. But it was despicable, disgraceful, and the fact that it happened so recently and in such an industrial and also humiliating manner. It wasn't just that the Nazis wanted to kill Jews particularly, but they wanted to humiliate them until their last dying breath. Disgusting. I am never going to excuse the Holocaust ever, but that doesn't change the fact that within the Jewish faith, and bear in mind, I don't believe in God. I think it's all bullshit. But in the Jewish faith, it's written that Jews, yes, it was thousands of years ago, like all of the sacred texts were written, even the Quran written, just over 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. But there's huge amounts of barbaric acts. And yes, you can say, yes, but there are liberal people in my faith who don't believe that, who think that's wrong, who wouldn't do that, who are loving people. Yes, there are. But you know what? In some ways, as much as I hate them, I hate Orthodox people for following their books because I think their books are bullshit, invented based on the belief in goblins and fairies. I think it's all bullshit, but in some way, at least I have a bit more respect for them because they actually follow their stupid books. But then you've got other people who say, well, God didn't really know what he was thinking when he actually came up with these books. Although actually it's just not appropriate because we live in 2019 to be hating homosexuals. We want to be seen as a nice, friendly religion, so we'll say we like gays now. We'll say, come along, gays, come along, because we've only got about 12 people in our membership anyway. And we want some more. We don't really mind if they're gays, if they have to be. So we're saying we love gays. Come on in, gays. Come on in, lesbians. Come on in all different groups of people. We love you all, even though our book says we should stone you to death. The hypocrisy is not gone unnoticed. And I'm going on to other topics here, but I don't know why a gay person would want to follow a religion that says you shouldn't be a member, because you ignore it and say, well, but it's 2019 and God's changed his mind now. God's changed his mind. If he was God, he would know 3,000, 5,000, 2,000 years ago what the world would be like in 2019. But he clearly didn't. That's either because he's fucking stupid or he doesn't exist. One or the other. We're not going to have a confirmatory vote on it because that's fact. Well, the mitzvah is fact. Jews do not love or condone genocide. Just like most Muslims do not condone jihad, do not condone paedophilia. Most Christians do not condone putting your son on a wooden cross and crucifying him, or any other manner of killing your child, or stoning homosexuals to death. So there you go, 34 bloody minutes. That's got to be a record. If you got this far, you are very impressive. Anyway, I've been Benedict Garrett. This has been PECS and Politics live. Yeah, it's been live. I don't think, there's 2 people watching. They're not saying very much, though. Anyway, if you want to send me some feedback, you can be ultra critical if you like. You can write a little comment here, or you can send me a message via my Twitter at Benedict Garrett. or via my Instagram, or via my Facebook, or whichever way you so please. But thank you for tuning in. I'll be back soon to discuss another topic, and maybe your feedback. If you also sent in some feedback, you can also send in positive stuff as well. You don't need to. I'm so used to it. Lovely speaking with you, and I will speak with you again soon on episode 4. I don't know what I'm going to talk about then. It'll be something completely pointless. Ciao for now. End.